Thank you, Ms. Chavez. It's a delight to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers of this event and the Organization of Iranian American Communities for the invitation to be here today. I'm going to talk not about the situation in Iran. I'm going to talk about what Iran is doing in the region and how its policies and steps that Iran is taking now are making peace in the region harder and are actually a threat to our American national security. It will actually pose a risk to us in terms of our efforts to combat the Islamic State. And it also is putting millions of people in terrible difficulty in both Syria and Iraq. It's especially poignant to talk about this today, Human Rights Day, because in Syria, I think we have perhaps the worst human rights situation on the planet today. Over 10 million Syrians have now been displaced from their homes. There are over 3 million Syrians that have had to flee Syria into neighboring countries, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. If you can imagine things being so bad in your home country, you take refuge in neighboring Iraq, but that is the situation. The Assad regime, whose principal ally is Iran, has used chemical weapons, sarin, poison gas, and chlorine gas on a scale we have not seen since World War I. And it is in violation of major international agreements to limit the use of chemical weapons. The Assad regime, backed by Iran, has done this. The Assad regime has dropped bombs from aircraft and killed tens of thousands of civilians across the country, destroyed hundreds of thousands of homes with the support of Iran. How does Iran provide this support? I want you to leave the room today understanding exactly what Iran is doing in Syria. The first is Iran is giving money to an Assad regime that is now basically broke. This war in Syria has been going on for 4 years. The Syrian government is out of money, and the Iranians provide both cash and they provide oil, free, from Iran to a Syrian refinery in Homs. The Syrian government no longer has any oil. The Islamic State has captured all of the oil fields in Syria. And so the Syrian government is entirely dependent on this help from Iran for its energy supplies. The Iranian government is also providing arms to the Syrian government, the same Syrian government that is using the chemical weapons I mentioned, is bombing civilians, as I mentioned, providing a lot of arms. Russia also provides arms. But Iran's assistance now to Assad is considered to be more important than the help from Russia, according to almost any analyst of the situation. And perhaps most pernicious of all in Syria, the Iranians have actually sent soldiers. They have sent their own soldiers from the Iran Revolutionary Guard. The Iranians are the only country in the world who have sent uniformed military personnel to actually fight for Bashar al-Assad's regime. Iranian soldiers in uniform have been fighting. The Iranians have actually lost, the Revolutionary Guard has lost 2 generals in the fighting in Syria. 1 general was killed about 4 months ago. Both are at the rank of brigadier generals. They have lost other personnel, combat personnel. Moreover, they have organized militias from Lebanon. You have no doubt heard of Lebanese Hezbollah, which depends heavily on Iran for financing. On Iranian instructions, Hezbollah went into Syria and has been involved in a great deal of the fighting around the country. The Iranians organized Shia militias from Iraq to go and fight in Syria. Thousands of Iraqis are now on the ground also in Syria. Not only thousands of Hezbollah fighters, but thousands of Iraqi fighters. The situation, the fighting has gotten so severe And the casualties in both Hezbollah ranks and Iraqi Shia ranks so severe that now the Iranians are actually going to Afghanistan and recruiting people from the Hazara tribes in Afghanistan to go and fight inside Syria. As I said, Iran is now the #1 supporter of the Bashar al-Assad regime. If that isn't enough, Iran's role in Iraq has also become extremely pernicious. Let me talk about that. Perhaps some of you will remember when we had U.S. Army personnel on the ground in Iraq, and I was in Iraq. I spent 4.5 years there after the invasion. Any of you remember a group called the Sa'ib al-Haq that kidnapped and killed American soldiers? That is a militia, Shia Iraqi militia, funded by Iran, trained in Iran. They are now on the ground in Iraq, fighting against the Islamic State in and around Baghdad. Another group that we used to fight when the American army was there, a group called Kataib Hezbollah, is also now fighting on the ground inside Iraq against the Islamic State. So is a group called the Badr Corps. If any of you read the New York Times on Saturday, you would have noticed an article on the front page of the New York Times about the impact of these Iranian-supported Iraqi militias that are fighting against the Islamic State. They had gone into a Iraqi Sunni village and had killed civilians, had burned down houses, and had increased the animosity, the hatred between Iraqi Shia and Iraqi Sunnis. The militias are actually increasing the sectarian anger inside Iraq, and it is that sectarian anger that enables the Islamic State to recruit new fighters in places like Syria and in places like Iraq. Just to give you one last example of the pernicious role of Iran in Iraq. The Prime Minister of Iraq, the new one, Haider al-Abadi, is actually, I think, a very good man. I know him personally, and he is a man who tries to build bridges. I have seen that with my own eyes. He did not want someone from one of these militias that I was just talking about to be the interior minister, but Iran did. And Iran put pressure on other people in the Iraqi political system, and so the senior policeman, the top policeman, the man who commands all the police in the country, is actually the deputy commander of an Iranian-backed Shia militia. And this is causing great anxiety among the Iraqi Sunnis, and I think, as General Dempsey would tell you, as President Obama would tell you, we have to have the support of the Iraqi Sunnis if we are going to have success against the Islamic State in Iraq. I'm especially concerned about this now because there are some articles I have seen that if there is a nuclear agreement with Iran, and I don't know if there will be or not, I have no idea. If there is, then it will be possible for us to cooperate with Iran on a series of regional issues. And I just want to caution people that Iran's interest in the region and our interests in the region are not the same. Let me give you 3 examples. Number 1, President Obama and the administration, rightly, I think, have said that we can't fight the Islamic State, this awful organization and the terrible atrocities it has committed. We cannot fight it just with military means. There has to be a political solution. And yet, what I hope you understand from what I just told you in Syria and Iraq, the Iranians are not interested in a political solution with the opposition in Syria. The Iranians are not interested in a political solution, political rapprochement between Sunnis and Shias in Iraq. They're actually increasing the sectarian animosity. And so how we would work with Iran when their strategy and our strategy are very different is not at all clear. Second, Iran promotes Hezbollah in Lebanon, as I mentioned, and it promotes very much the idea of fighting Israel, the whole idea of a resistance front, as the Iranians and Hezbollah call it. And of course, American interests in the region include a strong relationship with a strong Israel. And so again, what we hope to achieve in the region in terms of a peace agreement that would help integrate Israel over time into the region versus what the Iranians want, which is the destruction of Israel, they say, again, does not fit. How we would work with them after a nuclear agreement, not at all clear. And finally, the Iranian regime itself seeks to promote revolution in the region. And we have a great many friends in places like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, who are very afraid of Iranian efforts to export revolution into the region. It actually makes it harder to bring a political solution when there is so much distrust between Arab countries and Iran. And Iranian government actions have aggravated that, including their actions in Syria and Iraq. So I welcome this group and your interest, not only in what is happening inside Iran, but also I urge you to remember the pernicious effects of Iranian policy in the region. Thank you again for this invitation, and happy Human Rights Day.